This is sort of a talk of the day. You know, I like I like Bruce Willis. I'm sure he's no burden to the people who um, uphold his dignity and his struggle. Um, as to Tara Lipinski, I respect Tara Lipinski. Um, I realize this is not a good time for some people to hear someone from an academic environment is more. I put eye drops in. It's mourning not being able to study Russian, um, not being able to admire those cultural figures of Russia who he does admire. Now it's not a good time to be questioning support for Kiev or shading um, feelings of abandonment towards the tragedy unfolding in Ukraine, which is on everybody's mind. Well, I'd like to invite the University of Pittsburgh not to regard me as a naive idealist hell bent on self destruction through uh, uh, spiritualism that is akin to the preacher in the first War of the Worlds film, walking with his Bible towards the oncoming Martians. Instead, I'd like to express my belief that although some of my concerns have about as much in common with my contemporaries as the abolitionists had with the antebellum South. You don't need to chase me out onto a tree because I have differences of opinion. The situation in America is not really what it was during the Civil War and the lead up to the Civil War. It's just tense, and the tension is made worse by confusion. And because I'm deaf, I don't hear what people say about me, so I'm a magnet for confused ideas. And now, if you want to say my ideas are confused, you should perhaps hear them out. I like the idea of a Green New Deal. I don't think anybody who's ever known me will be surprised by that. I feel my contemporaries missed the boat. My formative years were under JFK. I've never been able to replace him in my starry-eyed sense of how leadership should go. George Bush, somehow, he was a threat to himself and others. Held um, the man and wrecked what was once thought unthinkable in pulverizing the Middle East. And Clinton, of course, and Obama climbed aboard because they were wagging their tails to get approval from the Bush machine. Now, people argue we need a strong America. How strong we could debate. I think we waste tax and spend on nuclear bombs as some sort of Aztec worship of the shrine. I'm told from the people in the military that's not true, blah, blah, blah. But so many people risk their behinds and lose their lives in the name of warfare that you wonder why the diplomatic corps aren't put first and honored for the risks that they take. Now, sort of captain of the guard of the fraternity I lucklessly stumbled on took me as a good example of someone who should be um, exampled as deserter. I was about 2 years old, or it was before I was conceived that they were going to do this. In other words, anybody born with a lot of people have forgotten this, but if you went to college in the Vietnam War, you didn't have to get drafted, and that caused some resentment. So anybody who was educated was to be hated. And they made me deaf, which as sort of a generous gesture. You're disabled, so you don't have to go to war. But then they said, but we're going to use you. This is the Nazism and the VA at work. I disapprove of that. George Bush is mentally ill, severely, not just a little. Anyway, so what I think about the situation in the world where the tension is, well, I take people like Cornel West and Gerald Horne with, some reservations. I realize that there's some problems with um, the black community. They don't need to be focused on America. But if America would mind its own judgment, it would go better with everyone. Latin America has suffered from our lack of judgment inordinately because they're intelligent people who are working hard. Asia, of course, is probably the place where we should ask about what sort of jeopardy China poses because they're neighbors of China. The only reason we call ourselves neighbors of China is because we push our borders up to their doorstep. Now, the people surround China don't seem to be particularly concerned about them, so I don't think we should be either. They're an old country who's had civil service exams before we even existed. They're intelligent people. They're not asking all that much of us to be respectful of them. Neither is North Korea. And Russia has proven over and over again when it wants to, it can be exemplary in the realm of diplomacy. When it wants to. And we need to acknowledge these facts instead of being hardwired for uh, rooftop adventures of the fourth kind. Get up there with our antennas and our gas masks and make up reasons to be hysterical. And I don't see that as constructive. And a lot of it comes from the Looney Tune gospel that we've inherited from the Cold War cinema relics that have failed to get past our evaluation. Instead, they bypass our evaluation. We should be more carefully evaluating what we consider rational filmmaking. Our standards have depreciated significantly, and I don't just mean the tawdry stuff, but the violence and so forth that we come to accept as normal. The PlayStation violence. And it's not doing our youth any good. It's not making them more battle ready, if that's what you think. What we need is a politics, as Jesse Jackson put it, where violence is truly a last resort. Putin himself has quoted Jesse Jackson. He said that himself, that he feels like a cornered rat. And Jeffrey Sachs has pointed out that JFK made a speech where that's the very thing we must never do when it comes to one of our adversaries or rivals, is corner them and make them fight. And we should never leave no way out that way. I encourage people to watch Jeffrey Sachs and get his picture. I have never had that kind of experience. All I am is a deaf man who likes to read books. And when I watch some of the people who the media is hysterical about, I'll give you an example. Mr. Kim, is that his name? The leader of North Korea. I've seen some of their propaganda films. They just want people to be decent, nice, if you believe their propaganda. Okay, so the propaganda is not hateful. It's that we want to go our own way and we want dignity. We want people to say nice things about us. Don't get hysterical about us. That's the propaganda. Okay, so I mean, you can do like this here and not there about them being full of propaganda. At least acknowledge what it is and what it's saying. Okay. He comes out with his daughter, and the headlines in America are hysterical. Oh, grooming her to be a new dictator. That's not what he's saying. He's showing that he, like anybody else, cares about the people in his family. He heard the horrible story. Now, the tragedy in the United Nations that the Ukrainian situation has pushed to the breaking point in the capacity of our societies to repair after this terrible ordeal of COVID-19 has been as long in the making as Russia claims. Whether you suspect their motives as I do or not, it has been as long in the making as they claim. George Bush was extremely mentally disturbed. The way that Colin Powell came out and lied about weapons of mass destruction and preyed on figments of the imagination and wasn't called immediately a promulgator of purposeful hallucinations had me staring into space for a long time. I could not believe that what I had been raised, reading the New Republic. The New Republic was a pro-Israeli rag. I was getting dragged through glass by the Israelis who humiliated me, but they still made more sense to me than anybody else. Over and over and over again said that war in the Middle East was unthinkable. And here we are, so we didn't care anything about all the realities. June said they destroyed a country in Iraq. Nice of them. That's what he said. Is he wrong? No. It was a mentally disturbed thing to do. It had nothing. We live with these myths that come down to us as chivalrous, and we're not supposed to use the word chivalrous in the bait scene because they think it's too big of a word. You know what I mean? It's too phony of a word. It's too sophomoric for real beats. Don't say chivalrous. Say false assumptions or something, but don't say chivalrous. Well, whatever you want to call them. We get these ideas that the Serbians are all of them gnashing their teeth night and day. It's like an image that's implanted in our heads from World War I, and we can never question. So when the media needs to make Russia look um, like they're coming unhinged, they trot out the Serbian, and these things need to be questioned. Because the realization that the earth can't take it anymore have reached just about everybody there is. So when I hear the Green New Deal, I'd like to think we get a Green New Deal from a vantage point of looking a little bit more clearly at the fact that there hasn't been a war with China. And they've been around a really long time. And when you want to talk about them, you should talk about them for what they are knowledgeably. The same thing holds true about North Korea and Russia and Iran. You should talk about them as they are knowledgeably, or otherwise say, look, I don't really know the situation. I wish that I could study that problem and go try to find someone who can teach you and study it a little bit. And I urge people to look at some of the alternative views like Jeffrey Sachs. He's the leader of the Sustainable Development um, Office at the United Nations, and he was a diplomat with the Russians. He knows those people. Nobody's trying to justify the tragedy, uh, but it's sad because it's senseless. And the senselessness was also sad in the Middle East. And I don't think I need to preach to anybody because some people just make up their minds to support whatever happens from the authorities. Just support it because it'll go easier for you. And other people feel that one of America's strengths is that we question those things and defend our right to do that. Elijah Lovejoy was among those who fell, defending the right to be against slavery. I realize people think, oh, you're selective, you're cherry picking the resistance for some white figure. I'm acknowledging that he was a great hero in American tradition. That's all. Doesn't say anything at all about my appreciation of Zora Neale Hurston or anybody else. So I don't need people putting blinders on me and telling me it's not important to see someone like Elijah Lovejoy for who he was, or James Garfield for who he was. What does it better the black cause to turn down appreciation from and by your friends in the white community? I don't follow it. But if that's where it is with some of the people from UW Dialectical, well, don't expect me to follow suit. I admire who I admire, and that's just how it is. If somebody tells me don't admire Elijah Lovejoy, I will mourn. If someone tells me not to admire Camellia Valieva, I will mourn. If someone tells me not to admire the outspoken, wonderful people in Ukraine, I will mourn. Don't support the children of Syria, I will mourn. Don't support Black Negro heritage, I will mourn. The literature of the African American Harlem Renaissance is still some of the best literature in America. It has every chance of saving America's soul. And that's one of the things that Richard Wright said, was that you have to understand and appreciate it, even if you're black, for it to do any good at all. And he predicted the day would come when angry black people went the fascist road. And what did he do? He mourned it. If it comes to that, I will too.